sum up, the moment they walked away, they believed the story was already over. In their mind, they had already imagined how the next chapter would unfold. They pictured you questioning yourself. They expected silence from you to mean surrender. They expected every passing day to slowly pull you back toward them until your need for answers became stronger than your respect for yourself. That prediction wasn't magic. It wasn't destiny. It was based on patterns they had witnessed before. Human beings become comfortable predicting familiar behavior, and when someone has watched enough people respond to rejection with panic, they begin believing everyone will. But something unexpected happened. Instead of chasing, you paused. Instead of proving your worth, you became curious about your own emotions. Instead of trying to change their mind, you started changing your routines. That single shift disrupted every expectation. Most people think emotional shock comes from dramatic confrontations, angry messages, or public displays of revenge. In reality, the greatest psychological disruption often comes from the complete absence of predictable behavior. The brain is constantly trying to complete unfinished patterns. When a familiar sequence suddenly stops, attention increases. Instead of fading, questions multiply. Assumptions become unstable. The person who believed they understood you suddenly realizes they don't. That uncertainty is uncomfortable for anyone. When someone expects desperation but encounters composure, the mind immediately begins searching for explanations. Did they move on already? Did they never care? Are they pretending? Did someone else enter their life? None of those questions are necessarily true, yet the mind dislikes empty spaces. It would rather invent explanations than tolerate uncertainty. This is why emotional discipline carries so much power. Not because it manipulates another person, because it prevents your emotions from becoming predictable reactions controlled by someone else's decisions. There is a difference between feeling pain and becoming defined by pain. Pain is inevitable whenever attachment is broken. Your nervous system notices the absence before your thoughts do. Familiar routines disappear, morning messages stop, evening conversations fade, places become reminders, songs become emotional triggers. Even ordinary moments suddenly carry invisible weight. That is not weakness. That is biology. Your brain built expectations through repetition. Every shared experience reinforced neural pathways connecting that person to comfort, anticipation, and emotional safety. When the relationship ends, those pathways remain active long after the person has disappeared. You are not simply missing someone. Your mind is adjusting to the disappearance of patterns it once depended upon. Understanding this changes everything. Instead of believing every emotional wave is evidence that you should reconnect, you begin recognizing it as part of adaptation. You stop confusing withdrawal with destiny. You stop interpreting longing as proof that someone belongs in your future. You begin separating emotion from instruction. That distinction is one of the most valuable forms of emotional intelligence. Feel deeply. But don't obey every feeling. Notice every thought, but don't believe every thought. Observe every impulse, but don't act on every impulse. Freedom begins where automatic reactions end. Many people spend years believing confidence is something loud. They imagine confidence as perfect posture, clever responses, or complete emotional immunity. Genuine confidence usually looks much quieter. It is choosing not to interrupt your own healing to satisfy someone else's expectations. It is allowing unanswered questions to remain unanswered. It is accepting that closure sometimes comes from your own understanding rather than another person's explanation. People underestimate how exhausting emotional chasing becomes. Every message sent for reassurance creates temporary relief followed by renewed uncertainty. Every attempt to force clarity often produces even greater confusion. Eventually, your emotional state becomes dependent on responses you cannot control. That dependence slowly erodes self-respect. The turning point arrives when you recognize that peace cannot be negotiated through another person's approval. Peace becomes an internal decision before it becomes an external reality. Imagine carrying a glass filled to the very edge with water. Every unexpected movement spills something valuable. Now, imagine slowly reducing the amount inside that glass until sudden movements no longer create chaos. That is emotional regulation. Life continues shaking the glass. You simply stop overflowing every time it does. People often confuse emotional regulation with emotion suppression. They are not the same. Suppression buries emotions until they explode later. Regulation allows emotions to exist without allowing them to control behavior. You can miss someone and still choose distance. You can love someone and still recognize incompatibility. You can feel sadness while continuing to build your future. Multiple truths can exist simultaneously. Emotional maturity is learning to carry those truths without forcing them into simple answers. The greatest transformation usually begins long before anyone else notices. No dramatic announcement, no public declaration, no desperate attempt to prove growth, just quiet consistency. One morning you wake up and realize you checked your phone less often, and another week passes before you notice you laughed without thinking about the past. A month later you discover an entire afternoon disappeared without memories interrupting your attention. Healing rarely arrives as one unforgettable moment. It arrives disguised as ordinary days becoming lighter. Then something remarkable happens. The same silence that once felt unbearable begins feeling peaceful. The same independence that once terrified you becomes familiar. The same uncertainty that once created panic now creates possibility. Your identity slowly separates from the relationship. You begin remembering parts of yourself that existed before the attachment. Old interests return. New ambitions appear. Conversations become easier. Your posture changes. Your voice becomes steadier. Not because someone rescued you, because you rescued your attention from living exclusively inside the past. Attention is your greatest psychological resource. Where attention goes, emotional energy follows. If attention remains trapped in imagined conversations, imagined reconciliations, imagined explanations, then your emotional life becomes imprisoned by events that no longer exist. When attention returns to the present moment, something extraordinary happens. Reality becomes larger than memory. Possibility becomes stronger than regret. And gradually, without forcing it, the version of you that once depended on external validation begins disappearing. A different version takes shape. Someone calmer, someone more observant, someone less interested in convincing others and more interested in understanding themselves. When transformation cannot be faked. People notice it because your behavior changes before your words do. You stop arguing for your value. You stop performing for acceptance. You stop measuring your worth through another person's ability to recognize it. Instead, your standards become internal. Your discipline becomes personal. Your growth becomes private. Ironically, this is often the moment when people who underestimated you begin paying attention again. Not because you became louder, because you became less available to emotional chaos. Human beings instinctively notice changes in patterns. When someone who once reacted immediately becomes patient, curiosity increases. When someone who once sought approval begins making decisions independently, assumptions collapse. But by then, something inside you has already changed. Your goal is no longer making someone regret losing you. Your goal is ensuring you never abandon yourself again. That shift is permanent. Because once you experience the stability that comes from respecting your own boundaries, it becomes difficult to return to emotional dependence. You begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, how do I make them understand? You ask, why did I believe my value depended on their understanding? Instead of asking, why didn't they choose me? You ask, am I choosing a life that reflects my own standards? Those questions change the direction of your future. Every answer builds a stronger foundation. Every decision reinforces a healthier identity. Every quiet act of discipline becomes evidence that your life is moving forward, even when your emotions occasionally look backward. The person you are becoming is not created through comfort. They are shaped through every moment you refuse to surrender your peace for temporary reassurance. Every day you honor your own growth over familiar patterns. Every choice you make to invest your attention where it can actually create a better future rather than endlessly replaying a past that no longer has the power to define who you become. There comes a moment when your attention begins to return to you instead of remaining trapped in someone else's choices. At first, the change is almost invisible. You still think about them. Certain memories still appear without invitation. Certain places still remind you of conversations that once felt permanent. But something subtle begins to happen beneath the surface. Instead of asking why everything ended, you begin asking what this experience is trying to teach you. That question changes the direction of your life. Pain has a remarkable ability to expose habits that comfort often hides. During peaceful seasons, people rarely stop to examine their emotional patterns. They continue reacting automatically because nothing forces them to look inward. Loss interrupts that routine. It shines a light on beliefs that have quietly shaped decisions for years. Maybe you believed your value depended on being needed. Maybe you believed love required sacrificing your own peace. Maybe you confused emotional intensity with emotional security. Maybe you ignored warning signs because hope felt stronger than evidence. These realizations are uncomfortable, but discomfort is often the beginning of awareness. Once you see a pattern clearly, it becomes much harder to continue living inside it without questioning whether it truly serves you. Every relationship teaches something. votes and topped on my high. The infeshing that showed in something information and a think, 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 think. Healthy relationships teach trust, cooperation, patience, and encouragement. Difficult relationships often teach boundaries, discernment, resilience, and self-respect. Neither lesson is wasted if you allow yourself to learn instead of remaining trapped in resentment. Resentment feels productive because it keeps the mind occupied, but it rarely creates progress. It convinces you that replaying the past will somehow produce a different outcome. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Meanwhile, your future quietly waits for the moment you decide to participate in it again. There is enormous freedom in recognizing that your future does not need permission from your past. Think about how much energy people spend trying to explain themselves to someone who has already decided not to understand them. They rewrite messages, they imagine conversations, they prepare arguments. They collect evidence hoping that one perfect explanation will suddenly change everything. Yet genuine understanding cannot be forced. Someone who wants to understand you usually asks questions. Someone who has already reached a conclusion often looks only for information that confirms it. Recognizing that difference protects your peace. It reminds you that not every misunderstanding is your responsibility to solve. One of the strongest habits you can develop is learning to observe your own thoughts without immediately accepting them as facts. The mind is an extraordinary storyteller. It fills gaps, predicts outcomes, exaggerates fears, and revisits painful memories with remarkable detail. Left unchecked, it can create emotional storms from possibilities that never become reality. Awareness interrupts that cycle. The next time your thoughts tell you that you will never recover, notice the thought. The next time they insist that no one will ever appreciate you again, notice the thought. The next time they convince you that your best days disappeared with one person, notice the thought. Observation creates distance. Distance creates perspective. Perspective creates better decisions. This is how emotional resilience grows. Not because difficult thoughts disappear, but because you stop allowing every difficult thought to dictate your behavior. Imagine standing beside a busy highway. Thousands of vehicles pass by every hour. You notice them, but you do not chase every car that drives past. Thoughts work the same way. They arrive constantly. Some are useful. Some are misleading. Some are simply emotional echoes. Wisdom is learning which ones deserve your attention. Attention is limited. Every minute spent feeding destructive narratives is a minute unavailable for building something meaningful. Ask yourself where your attention has been living. Has it been trapped in yesterday? Has it been consumed by imagined conversations? Has it been invested in proving your worth to someone who already made their decision? Or has it been quietly building the person you hope to become 1 year from now? The answer explains far more about your future than your circumstances do. Your habits reveal your direction. Tiny decisions repeated consistently shape identity more than dramatic moments ever will. Getting out of bed when motivation is absent, keeping promises you make to yourself, exercising when excuses sound convincing, reading instead of endlessly scrolling, calling a friend instead of isolating yourself, preparing healthy meals instead of surrendering to convenience. None of these actions seem extraordinary on their own. Over time, they become evidence that you trust yourself. Self-trust grows whenever your actions consistently align with your intentions. Without self-trust, confidence remains fragile because it depends on external approval. With self-trust, confidence becomes much steadier because it is reinforced by your own behavior every day. People often wait until they feel confident before taking action. In reality, action usually comes first. Confidence follows evidence. Each completed task becomes proof. Each promise kept becomes proof. Each obstacle overcome becomes proof. Eventually, your mind has no choice but to recognize the pattern. It can expecting competence instead of failure because your actions have repeatedly demonstrated capability. This process is not glamorous. It is rarely exciting. It is built through ordinary discipline practiced on ordinary days. Those ordinary days become extraordinary years. You also begin to notice something fascinating about emotional strength. It is not measured by how little you feel. It is measured by how wisely you respond to what you feel. Anyone can react. Few people can respond intentionally. Reaction is immediate. Response includes reflection. Reaction is controlled by emotion. Response is guided by values. That difference shapes every important relationship in your life. And you continue growing, your standards naturally change. You become less impressed by empty promises and more attentive to consistent actions. You stop confusing attention with commitment. You recognize that chemistry without character creates instability, while character without constant excitement often builds lasting trust. Your priorities become clearer. Peace becomes more attractive than drama. Consistency becomes more valuable than intensity. Respect becomes non-negotiable. These changes are signs of maturity, not emotional distance. You are not becoming colder. You are becoming wiser about where you invest your heart. Eventually, you reach a place where memories lose their power to control your day. You may think exist, but they no longer dictate your choices. Gratitude slowly replaces bitterness because you realize every experience contributed to the person standing here now. That realization brings unexpected confidence. Not confidence based on believing nothing difficult will ever happen again. Confidence based on knowing that whatever happens, you possess the ability to adapt, learn, recover, and continue moving forward. That is a different kind of strength. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be given by another person. It is earned through every challenge you refuse to let define the limits of your future. And once that strength becomes part of your identity, you stop searching for someone else to complete you. Instead, you begin looking for relationships that complement the life you have intentionally built rather than replacing the foundation you have already created for yourself. The most dangerous illusion after a painful separation is believing that healing will arrive the moment someone else changes their mind. It sounds convincing because it offers a simple solution. If they return, everything will be fixed. If they apologize, the pain will disappear. If they finally recognize your value, peace will come back into your life. But peace that depends entirely on another person's decision is never truly yours, is borrowed. Borrowed peace can be taken away as quickly as it arrived. Real peace is different. It survives uncertainty. It can remain steady even when answers never come. It allows you to continue building your life regardless of who stays or who leaves. This kind of peace doesn't appear overnight. It is built through hundreds of quiet decisions that nobody applauds. Choosing sleep instead of replaying old conversations. Choosing movement instead of remaining trapped in the same room all day. Choosing curiosity instead of self-condemnation. Choosing discipline instead of emotional impulse. Every one of those decisions sends a message to your mind. I am still responsible for my life. That message matters more than most people realize. The human brain is constantly collecting evidence about who you believe yourself to be. Once every action becomes another piece of evidence, if your actions consistently communicate helplessness, your identity slowly begins adapting to that story. If your actions consistently communicate resilience, responsibility, and persistence, your identity adapts to that story instead. Identity is not formed by isolated moments, it is formed by repeated behavior. Think about a mountain stream. No single drop of water carves the stone. Millions of drops falling consistently over time reshape the landscape. Your daily habits work exactly the same way. One workout changes very little. One chapter of a book changes very little. One difficult conversation changes very little. One thing repeated consistently. These small actions reshape your thinking, your confidence, your relationships, and eventually your future. People searching for instant transformation often overlook the incredible power of gradual change. Gradual change is less exciting. It is also far more dependable. You may not notice yourself becoming stronger this week. You may not notice next month, but 6 months from now, someone who hasn't seen you for a while may notice something before you do. Your voice sounds calmer. Your decisions seem clearer. Your posture reflects certainty. Your attention is no longer scattered. Your energy is no longer consumed by problems that once dominated every waking hour. And growth often becomes visible to others before it becomes obvious to you. That is because you experience yourself every day. Small improvements feel ordinary when you witness them continuously. Never underestimate those small improvements. Every healthy boundary strengthens self-respect. Every honest conversation strengthens integrity. Every difficult choice strengthens discipline. The strongest people are rarely those who avoid hardship. They are usually the ones who refuse to waste hardship. Every disappointment contains information. Every setback reveals something. Every failure teaches something that success often cannot. Instead of asking why this happened only to you, begin asking what this experience makes possible that comfort never could. Perhaps it teaches patience. Perhaps it teaches discernment. Perhaps it teaches emotional independence. Perhaps it reveals strengths you never knew existed because life never demanded them before. Adversity introduces you to parts of yourself that comfort keeps hidden. You discover courage only when fear exists. You discover resilience only after being challenged. You discover patience only when immediate answers disappear. The qualities you admire most in others are almost always forged under pressure. Pressure is uncomfortable. It is also transformative. Many people spend years avoiding discomfort without realizing they are also avoiding growth. The conversation they need to have remains postponed. The dream they want to pursue remains delayed. The boundary they should establish remains ignored. Eventually, avoidance becomes its own prison. Every avoided decision quietly accumulates emotional weight until even small choices begin feeling overwhelming. Freedom returns the moment you begin facing life directly instead of negotiating with every uncomfortable emotion. You do not need certainty before taking the next step. You need willingness. Courage has never required the absence of fear. It requires movement despite fear. Imagine waiting until every wave disappears before learning to sail. You knew it would spend your entire life standing on the shore. Life does not become calmer simply because you hesitate. You become stronger by learning how to navigate changing conditions. That perspective changes everything. Instead of demanding perfect circumstances, you begin developing greater capability. Capability creates confidence. Confidence creates consistency. Consistency creates results. The cycle begins with a single decision. One decision to stop measuring your value through another person's approval. One decision to stop chasing explanations that may never arrive. One decision to stop allowing yesterday to determine today's effort. That decision becomes a turning point because every future choice begins growing from a healthier foundation. Soon you notice that your conversations change. Instead of constantly discussing what went wrong, you begin talking about where you are going. Instead of seeking sympathy, you seek wisdom. Instead of counting losses, you begin counting opportunities. This shift influences the people around you as well. Your energy becomes different, not louder, not more dramatic, simply steadier. People naturally trust those whose emotions are not controlled by ever-passing circumstance. Steadiness creates influence. Reliability creates respect. Integrity creates lasting confidence. There will still be difficult mornings. Certain memories may still arrive unexpectedly. Certain anniversaries may briefly reopen old emotions. Healing does not erase history. It changes your relationship with it. The memories remain. The emotional control they once held gradually fades. You stop asking life to remove every reminder. Instead, you become the kind of person who is no longer defined by those reminders. That is emotional freedom. Freedom is not forgetting. Freedom is remembering without becoming trapped. It is carrying wisdom forward without dragging unnecessary pain behind you. As your future expands, something surprising happens. The relationship that once felt like the center of your world becomes one chapter among many. Important, meaningful, influential, to make not placed at strength, but no longer the entire story. You begin creating experiences that deserve your attention more than your memories do. New friendships, new skills, new ambitions, new places, new challenges. Your identity continues expanding until the version of yourself who once believed life had permanently stopped feels like someone you used to know. That transformation happens quietly. One disciplined day becomes another. One courageous choice becomes another. One meaningful habit becomes another, until eventually your life is no longer organized around what you lost. It is organized around what you are building, what you are becoming, and the standards you refuse to compromise, because you finally understand that the quality of your future will always be determined more by the quality of your daily choices than by the opinions, decisions, or approval of anyone outside yourself.